it's Pam, and I wanted to share a little bit of insight from the nerding out that I've been doing researching for my new program Momentum and trying to understand why is it that certain people actually accomplish the goals they set out at the beginning of the year, so in growing their business or changing careers or writing a book or doubling their business or whatever the goals are, versus people who don't. And in pursuit of that, I picked up a book that I'd had on my bookshelf for a long time, which is called Mindset. Some of you may have seen it. It's a lot of people have been talking about it. It's by Carol Dweck, who's a PhD, a researcher at Columbia. And she talks about two different mindsets in the book. There's the fixed mindset and there's the growth mindset, which I'll go into in just a second. I noticed when I evaluated my coaching work and I started to think about the experience of different people that I've coached, that I recognize those two different mindsets in terms of how it is that people can react to a similar situation. So very commonly, the kinds of things that we work on when I'm working with a client are in breaking down whatever the big goal is into a smaller project. So maybe in some cases it's creating your book proposal and then shopping it around to try to get an agent to represent you, or maybe it is wanting to grow your business and so it's working on a couple of marketing or selling strategies in order to grow your business. And when you first go out and you try them and you bring it out into the world, when met with rejection, I find that there is a certain kind of client who may find after a few times that they start to really pull back and they can begin to question themselves and their basic competency. That familiar spiral that many of us have felt no matter our mindset, where you say, oh my gosh, maybe it's really me. Maybe I don't have it. Maybe I'm really not good enough. What was I thinking? Versus another kind of reaction from a client that might be doing a very similar set of experiences where they may meet rejection, but instead of really turning that on themselves and beginning to shut down, they become more open to learning about why is this happening and how might I improve what I'm doing? How can I learn something different in order to make it better? So it reminded me of an experience I had. I'm not sure if I shared this story with many of you before, but when I first started my blog, Escape from Cubicle Nation, in 2005, I had been a consultant for 10 years. I had successfully quit my job to start a business, but I had not helped other people do it. I'd gotten my training certification. I was excited to be working with people to do that, but I really didn't have that much experience doing it yet with many people. So I started writing my blog as a way to share useful tips and information for people, slowly begin to build an audience, and I begin to get clients and do the work directly with individuals. And in May of 2006, I wrote a post and I reached out to Guy Kawasaki, who I didn't know before, who was a popular blogger and venture capitalist in Silicon Valley. Many of you have heard this part of the story before, but he published my post on his blog the next day. I went from 100 readers to 20,000. I had this huge influx of attention and people from everywhere and emails, and it was extremely intoxicating and fantastic. At that same time, one of the people who sent me an email was a writer who had an agent, and he offered to introduce me to his agent because he said, I love your voice and you should write a book, so talk to my agent. So I did. I set up a meeting and I talked to the agent. I went to New York and met with him, and then we worked up a basic outline of the book. So it was the initial stage. It wasn't a full-on book proposal, but it was an initial draft of the concept. So he took it around to a number of different New York publishers. And I was waiting with bated breath. I felt so excited because I was on top of the world from all this attention I was getting. And he came back and he said basically nobody was interested in it at all, which was very devastating. In fact, he said specifically there was a publisher who said it was really quite pedestrian, just like, oh, how terrible. You know, no new voice, nothing fresh. Just, I was devastated. So I thought, okay, maybe it's just not the right time, and I just got back into writing. I had a bigger audience now. I just began to write like crazy for the next 18 months or so. I worked with a lot more people, so I gained a lot more experience of working with individuals that were going through that experience. And it was about 18 months later, I got an email one day from an editor that worked at a publisher in New York, and she said, I've been reading your blog and I've been listening to your podcast. I love your voice. Would you like to do a book with us? I actually thought it may not be real. It was like too good to be true. But I responded back to her, and indeed I found out that she did work for a publisher, and they ended up publishing my book, which was Escape from Cubicle Nation with Penguin Portfolio, which is who she worked with. This book also went on to win the Best Small Business Entrepreneur Book of 2009, which made me very super happy and proud. Ironically, the publisher who had told my initial agent that my work was pedestrian and there was nothing interesting was Penguin Portfolio. And they were right. They were right. The first draft, I didn't really have yet a complete understanding of what I wanted to share. I didn't clearly see exactly the steps that I wanted to share in the book. I needed more time in order to get my voice and write and get insight and research and connect. And so when I did that from a growth mentality, that's what ended up eventually attracting my ideal publisher. That's really the publisher that I had always wanted to go with. So it was wonderful, and I ended up doing my second book with them as well, and hopefully my third coming up. So my point is I totally understand completely the disappointment, frustration that you can have when you're working hard, you get good feedback. It should seem like you should be successful in what you're doing, but you meet rejection. Understanding what you can do to have more of a growth-oriented mindset is critical to you. And in mindset, the way she defines the two mindsets, just so you know, is she says that believing that your qualities are carved in stone, the fixed mindset, creates an urgency to prove yourself over and over. If you have only a certain amount of intelligence, a certain personality, and a certain moral character, well then you'd better prove that you have a healthy dose of them. It simply wouldn't do to look or feel deficient in these most basic characteristics, okay? So often from a fixed mindset, when you begin to get rejection or pushback when you're taking steps toward completing your goal, you can start to fall back, to close yourself more, to not want to take risks, and very importantly, as she describes, to not keep working and take action to get better. That's the danger of being in a fixed mindset. The growth mindset is based on the belief that your basic qualities are things that you can cultivate through your efforts. Although people may differ in every which way in their initial talents and aptitudes, interests, or temperaments, everyone can change and grow through application and experience. So when you get feedback, as you will when you begin to take the difficult steps and moving forward, that it's not good enough, you're not ready, people are not ready to buy, people are not interested, what you want to do is to get in the practice of asking yourself, what can you do differently? What can you learn? How can you get support in order to continue to move forward and really develop that growth mindset? And she recommends that as a particular focus area if you want to develop more of a growth mindset. And this is for everybody, even those of you that might find yourself naturally more toward growth, is where you look at a goal that you've been trying to accomplish and you reach a point of frustration where it's not working for you. Dig in and ask yourself, what has been your response that's maybe a little bit more fixed mindset? One response is just to back away, right? You're sure that this is the year that you want to write a book. You sit down to start to write and you feel like the words are not matching at all the brilliance that's in your head. And so you try it for a few days in a row, and then finally you just kind of back away from it, and you end up not going to the keyboard and not working on the book. That's a very natural reaction, okay? From the growth mindset, you might want to say, what is it that I can do in order to get me into a better practice? Is it everything from setting a timer so that no matter what, I write for a certain number of minutes a day? Do I need to change my environment, go somewhere different? Do I need to read a little bit more about the writing process? This book, Bird by Bird, totally changed my life and saved my tail. No kidding. When I wrote Escape from Cubicle Nation, I carried this book with me everywhere I went. And Anne Lamott, who's a writer and a writing teacher who wrote this book, writes about the process of writing in a totally hysterical way, but also let me understand that it is normal and natural to not at all sound like yourself, to be very frustrated, to have anxiety, to think that you're not worth anything when you're writing, but she just keeps saying write over and over and over. And it got me into a pattern of writing despite feeling like what I was writing didn't really make sense. It helped me so much. So that was an example of getting access to information about what I'm doing that just allowed me to continue to do it more, which eventually allowed me to finish a couple books. So I challenge you to take that approach, to look at something you've been trying to do. Maybe it's getting in a regular exercise for this year. Maybe it is in writing a book. Maybe you're really wanting to grow your business, or you want to rebrand your business and work with different clients, or maybe you want to change careers. And examine first, are there ways in which you've been shutting things down with a fixed mindset? What have you been telling yourself about your capacity to do it or not? And then adapt a growth mindset and look at what are the things you can do. What's information that might be helpful to you? What are resources or support? Is there a community? Is there a coach? Is there something you can do in order to keep moving forward? So I'd love to hear how that turns out for you. You can either write notes down below in the comments of the video, or I'll also put our email address where you can send me any of your personal story, because I'd really love to hear about it. I am always working on my own mindset, and I find as a creative professional it's something that I continually want to improve. And I don't think we're ever done. There's always more that we want to do, but the process of enjoying the learning as you go, not taking things so personally, I find makes the process of creating a lot more joyful when you're adapting the growth mindset. So hope it's been helpful. You can pick up the book Mindset. I highly recommend it, by Dweck. I'll put a link to it also down below, and let me know what you think. Thanks.